Alright. So I'm gonna preface this by saying that this was not meant to be the next episode of this. Originally it was supposed to be I was supposed to start my series on Nickelodeon, right? Those shows, specific shows run by a certain somebody. And then stuff started coming out and I got a little iffy on it. Well, actually, it was really going to be the Seinfeld curse. And I couldn't make it through watching LA. Got 2 episodes and it was like, this is horribly boring. So then I decided I'm going to do the Nickelodeon stuff. And then stuff started to come out. And then that documentary came out. And I'm like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. I could, but I just... It's iffy to watch those shows. So what am I going to do? Well, my next project, I said, okay, here I'm going to do... it was recent. I'm going to do a Nick at Night thing. And it's still on the docket. I just have to get some more shows to do it. So, we got George Lopez, which was also not supposed to happen. I had not planned this at all. What had happened was, I saw that his new show, Lopez vs. Lopez, was on Peacock, so I went to watch it. And I saw this was on it, so I said, you know what? Or as he would say, Sasuke, I'm going to take this one out first. So, yeah, I watched this. So, I figured I'll talk about it. So, George Lopez was a sitcom that aired on ABC from 2002 to 2007 for 6 seasons. And that's a pretty strong run. It didn't end specifically because I just watched the finale like 10 minutes ago. It's sort of an ending. Like George sort of gets, some character stuff in there, but I got a burp. But it's not a finale because the show was actually canceled. It didn't end. So, it feels a little bit like it could be a finale type situation. Maybe if they went with the ending they were teasing and then they went back on it, but I don't know. I actually remember watching the finale when it aired back in 2007 and thinking, much like when he ended Boy Meets World, okay, we're going to go from here because Boy Meets World ended with them, spoiler alert, going to New York City. So, oh yeah, they're going to go to New York. What's going to happen next week is like reruns and stuff. I'm like, no. My mom had to explain to me what a series finale was. And so with this, I thought the same thing. Okay, maybe it's not coming back right. I knew what seasons were at this point. So I'm like, okay, the next season. But we never got any new ones. This was it. Back in the day, I used to go to a website called TV.com. I don't know if it's still up, but back in the day I did. And that's where I would find out if a show was canceled or renewed or why I didn't pause this video instead of muting it. But, yeah. So, like most shows that star a comedian, the show is based on his personal life growing up. When George Lopez, if you ever listen to his stand-up, he talks about it a lot. He was raised by his grandparents. So, his mom character in the show, Benny, is like an amalgamation of both of them and how he was treated, she even says the line, "Why are you crying?" a few times during the show. So, yeah. And so it's George, his wife, Angie, hello, and his children, older daughter, Carmen, younger son, Max, and he deals with his mom, and eventually Angie's dad comes into the picture, and then his niece from Angie's side of the family comes in, and there's other characters like his best friend Ernie, and yeah. So let's start with the main character. So we have George Lopez, played by George Lopez. He's the only character that has the same name, although Benny is close, as the actress Belita Moreno is close to Benita Lopez, which is what her character's full name is in the show. But George Lopez, he was raised by his mother, who did not treat him very well, so now he wants to provide a better life for his kids. But his kids are the worst kids ever. Like, they just pile on stuff. like maybe the first 2 seasons. The first season is only 6 episodes, which is why you get the complete first and second seasons. For a long time, this was the only set you could get until they released the Warner Archive stuff. Otherwise, that's the only DVD you could get at the time. And I bought that twice because I had it, and then I traded it to a friend, and then I bought it again because I wanted it back. So yeah, man, they're like the worst kids. My kid, by comparison, he's an angel, and he's done a few bad things, but not like this. Like, oh my god, I'm hoping his teenage years aren't as bad as this. Because, I mean, first of all, he's a boy, so it's not gonna be too bad. But like, Carmen, she goes way off the deep end real quick. Like, she's all about boys, 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 which what teenage girls are. But it's like, she's dating this dude in like season 2 that like give her a hickey, and then her biggest story throughout the series is with this guy named Jason, who just disappears after season 4. Yeah, there's a big storyline with Jason in season 4. They date in season 3, and then he sort of leaves because they have a big breakup because, well, Carmen goes through the most. Early on, she's with this guy. It's not Jason. It's a different guy that she's with that goes around because Carmen dumps him because the thing is, they go to a party and he tries to get, as George would put it, with her, and she doesn't want to. So he dumps her because that's all he was interested in. And she even dyed his hair for him because that's girls do that. Whoever wrote this didn't know that when it comes to relationships, unfortunately, man, we gotta realize the women are in control. And this show makes the opposite. Like, she did everything for... Sometimes a woman will do some stuff for a man, but come on, guys are the ones that have to step up for the women. So, it's but the TV show is not always, portrayed right. But then after that, he goes around telling everybody that they did it and that she gets called a whore, Carmen Lopez written on the wall or the garage. And so then she has to go to a private school. Well, then that caused financial troubles, and eventually she can't go to the private school and ends up going to a Catholic school instead. And then you have Max, who sort of has nothing going, and then he becomes like a skateboarder in like season 3, yeah, and that kind of goes forward, and he gets into trouble. At one point in like season 4, they think about moving to Colorado. He gets a job offer for an airplane parts factory, which is where he works. Powers Brothers. We'll get to them in a minute. And he gets another job for an airplane parts factory in Colorado. I think it's a better place. But it turns out there's just as much crime there as there is in LA. So, yeah. Max gets a hickey, and Carmen is drunk. So, yeah, they go back home, which is fine. So, a big turn happens. I think it's in season 2, actually. Or is it season 3? One of the two. Angie's dad, Vic, played by Emiliano Diaz, shows up and says that his wife left him for a younger man. But they're getting a divorce. She was cheating on him with a younger man, and they're getting a divorce. So he goes through a bunch of stuff, too, throughout the series. Eventually even proposing to a 27-year-old woman, played by Stacy Keibler. But turns out she's also cheating on him, and then he decides that... then Emelina calls him back, that's his ex-wife, and they calls him in to say they want to get back together, and then she dies. I don't know, they just like to pour on this shit. Anyway, back to Jason. During season 4, there's a storyline with Jason where his mom's an alcoholic and can't support him, so he moves in with the Lopez's, which there's no way in real life that you would let your daughter's boyfriend move in with you. And it's also kind of weird because they actually adopt him, which would mean that Carmen is technically dating her brother. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird, but yeah. And then, so talking about season finales, there's really nothing. Let's look at season 2. There's nothing in season 1 because that's so quick, right? I'm gonna put this back and I'll look at these. So season 1 is it's only 4 episodes in season 1. That's oh yeah. George finds out that not only Max but himself has dyslexia, which causes problems, and of course his mom didn't do anything about it. Oh yeah, the last episode of season 2 is where Angie's sister kisses George, but that's not a cliffhanger thing. It gets resolved in episodes. There's no cliffhanger. Season 3 cliffhanger has Carmen running away with Zach Powers, the son of one of the owners of Powers Brothers, Mel and Jack. I like Jack more than Mel. Jack is present more than Mel is. But then in the first half of the series, once the second half of the series, it feels like Mel's around more than Jack. So maybe it evens out. I don't know. But Mel's son, Zach, they ran away. But again, the same as the other boyfriend, he just wants to get into her pants, including getting her drunk, everything. And so she doesn't want that. She takes off, ends up in a music video with Chingy, and she's under 18. So it's kind of illegal for her to be in it, but she's in it. Chingy. And it's funny, George doesn't know who Chingy is. He's like, who's Chingy? And then when Vic shows up, he's like, what's Chingy doing here? And then in the 4th season finale, she wants so desperately to get married to Jason that she goes a little too much, trying to say that she's pregnant, but she's not pregnant. But she says that she is so that they can get married. And then has an argument with George, and George says you can get married when you're 18, but she only tells Jason that it's a June wedding. Doesn't say that it's the June, but not that June. But he freaks out and he leaves. And the season 5 opens with her being in denial until eventually she has to come to the realization that he left and he's never coming back, and we never see Jason again. And this feels like the actor had something else to do, or they didn't want to renew his recurring contract status or something, and he was just gone, because there's no real, from his side. We only get like a phone call. We don't see him again, and it's just like he's done, and he's not answering her phone calls, and it really feels like they couldn't get that actor to come back, so they had to write it off. Season 5 has the most cliffhangers. Every single person has a cliffhanger. First of all, we found out that Benny, George's mom, was involved with a robbery 30 years prior with Richard Riley, the guy from the grandpa from what's the show with I can't remember his name. Grounded for Life, the grandpa from Grounded for Life, and he was also the lawyer in Texas Chainsaw 3D. Do you think, cuz? Yeah, he shows up. George bumps into him at a convenience store, and then we see that he robs the convenience store right afterwards. And then we find out that he committed a crime 30 years prior, and Benny was his getaway driver. So Benny is facing jail time. So that's her cliffhanger. Carmen is trying to apply for college, and she gets rejected from all of them except for one, and then she's opening her last one, and that's her cliffhanger. Max is drinking beer for the first time. He has a whole 6-pack. He opens up a can, and that's his cliffhanger. Vic is doing an online dating. He's dating a 27-year-old Lindsay, like I said, and he proposes to her. That's his cliffhanger. We don't get an answer. Angie might be pregnant. That's her cliffhanger. And Ernie shows up to tell George that the factory is going to close. That the factory might be moving to Mexico. That's what, 5 cliffhangers, right? Including Max, 5 cliffhangers. Angie, Vic, George, Benny, Max, Carmen. Yeah. 6. 6 cliffhangers, actually. 6. And, like, right away when season 6 starts, they all get cleared up real quick. Ernie comes in and goes, "Oh, don't worry, George. It's just a rumor. It's not moving to Mexico." Although that does end up being the end of the season series storyline, actually. Angie finds out she is pregnant, and then later she gets her period, so she's not pregnant. So it was a false positive, but she doesn't tell George right away. Carmen gets into college, but we don't see her confirm it on screen. We find out from Angie, because Marcia Lucia, who plays Carmen, was gone from the show at this point. There was creative differences, and she didn't even come back for this first episode. And it's very awkward because it's supposed to be like her goodbye, but she's not there. We don't see her at all. Like, at all. All we get is like a montage or flashback stuff from previous seasons where George is too busy with his mom's stuff, trying to stop her from going to jail, to get to say goodbye to Carmen. I wish we got that goodbye vote in person, but we didn't for behind the scenes reasons, I guess. She left because of creative differences. Couldn't get one more episode out of her. I don't know. But yeah, Max gets a hangover, and Lindsay says yes to Vic, but then we find out she's a cheating, like I said, and then he tries to go back to his wife, and then she dies, and the whole thing. Characters die too. Early on in the series, George was told that his dad died when he was younger, but we find out that's not true. He actually left them, and Benny's choice was to tell him that he died. We find out he actually left, had a new family, and George has another brother, has a brother named George Lopez, played by Lou Diamond Phillips. Yes, I don't know why they decided. Well, the episode is about identity theft, so there's that, but logically, why would you have 2 sons with the same name? I don't know. We also find out that actually George had a sister that Benny gave away when she was born because she couldn't take care of 2 kids. She gave her to an Italian couple, and for some reason, her whole life she thought she was Italian, even though she looks like a Mexican. I don't know. Because he actually finds out from an aunt, his Aunt Cecilia, that Manny is still alive, and then he finds out. I think he finds out from the other George that he lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and then eventually they go towards the end of season 2. They go there and meet him, and he's sort of a jerk. And then season 3, they kind of try to get back to have some sort of relationship, and then we find out that he has a kidney disease. And then the night of George is going to give him a kidney, but he dies before they can give it to him. So they keep killing characters off. And then he has an uncle who also dies. An Uncle Joe. We only meet once in this episode. And he dies. They're like killing off his family, isn't it? I'm surprised the last episode didn't end with Benny dying. Actually, that would be fulfilling. She could die and then say, "George, something I never told you, I love you." And then she dies. My mom told me she loved me and then she died. But yeah, and so there's that story there, and then the Manny story kind of goes away. There's a lot of, I think the first 4 seasons are heavily focused. They focus on George, but also there's a lot of focus on the kids. And then it feels like they ran out of stuff for the kids to do. How many times can these kids get in trouble? Because from like season 5 on, George is more the focus, And I think because I think Carmen was the one that they could do all the stuff with, but they really ran their course with that. And so when season 5 started, George became the focus. And with that, as the show went along, so George has his mannerisms, like speaking in Spanglish, like Sasuke, or que la, or stuff like that. But like, as the show went on, like I noticed in the last season especially, he's more like a cartoon character with the way he talks. Like early on he talks normal, but every time he talks now, other than what are you doing? He's really loud and just like he's just having a regular conversation with Ernie. And Ernie is talking normal right here, and he's like way up here, right? Oh, by the way, they also do these flashback sequences. And instead of just getting kids to portray them, they have like kid bodies and they superimpose the actors' heads on it. So like you have like a little kid, George and Ernie, with their regular heads on there, and they'll put Benny in a wig to make her look younger or something. I don't know. It's kind of funny, but it's a weird. It's a weird kind of flashback ending they do. It's kind of funny. We have guest stars: Donovan McNabb, football player, Lou Diamond Phillips. What's his name? Mario Lopez. That's not who it is. Edward James Olmos in the series finale. Tommy Chong and Cheech Marin, not in the same episode. There's an episode where he thinks that this guy that his mom supposedly hooked up with named Lalo, that's Cheech Marin's character, it might actually be his dad, but it turns out the guy's actually gay, but he says that I could be your dad, but he's actually lying because he wanted a family. And then later, Tommy Chong just shows up in an episode where they're trying to hunt down a sex offender. And they find Tommy Chong, and he's not a sex offender, though. It's a woman. And it's one of those episodes where it's like they were like torching pitchforks ready to take this guy down. When they find out it was a woman, it's a double standard. They're like, oh, it's okay. But no, it's not okay. It's just, it should be the same either way. Man or woman, it's still bad news. And I'm not going to go on what Max does because it's oh. No. But I'm surprised during its run there wasn't like a musical episode. There was 2 episodes that have similar premises though, and I felt like the writers. I'm happy they didn't do any more because it felt like they're out of ideas here. In the first of these 2 episodes, George and Ernie go out drinking after he has an argument with Angie over because she's over his mother, I think it is. They have an argument over it, and so they go drinking, and he drinks tequila with the worm and has a vision that he is living Ernie's life where his mom babied him and was always there for him, and Ernie ends up married to Angie and having the kids, and they have the kids with it's the same actors for the kids, but they have big fake ears because of Ernie's ears. Yeah. Eventually Vic is there and he turns into the worm. And then at the end, Ernie drinks more tequila with the worm. And he's dancing with the worm. Even though it still looks like Vic. But he wouldn't visualize it as Vic. Could have anyone in there. It could be Gina. We'll get to the side characters in a minute. But like, yeah. And then the other one, episode Saba's gay, if you can think about it, he drinks the worm again and envisions a world where he and Ernie are gay and getting married, and Angie, who at this point is a wedding planner. George has a steady job. It's Angie's job that changes throughout the series. She becomes a wedding planner, and she's planning their wedding, even though George he can remember what his life was before this thing. And Vic ends up being the wedding pastor, and then he turns into the worm again, which I saw coming. It's like, okay, we don't need any more of those. That's it. It feels like they're running on ideas and they want just a fun thing. The first time was fun, and then the second time, we're doing it again? Because the first time I watched it, I'm like, I don't think I met this one yet. This doesn't feel like the same setup. But no, they did it twice, apparently. Let's talk about side characters, because there are some pretty interesting side characters. Early on, we get introduced to Accident Amy, played by Sandra Bullock, who was a producer for the show early on. And she's in like 3 episodes before she leaves. George's mom has a storyline where she's dating this guy named Randy, played by an early role by Nick Offerman. And they are getting married, and it turns out he had a thing with Accident Amy before she disappeared for a while and came back. Turns out she was in a coma. And so they end up making out, and she's blind at this point. But he wants to marry Benny, and then they end up not getting married, but they're still in a relationship, but we never see Randy again after that storyline's done. And he just disappears, because we never hear about him breaking up with her. He just disappears. Speaking of characters that disappear, although this one comes back, the character of, what's his name? Early on, they're trying to figure out, there's a guy that gets fired, and they have to figure out a new carpool thing. So, Frank, they meet with Frank. He becomes a recurring character early on in season 2. And then after season 3, he just disappears until like the last 2-part episode. He shows up again. I swear, he's there for a couple seasons, and he's just gone. Well, then we also have Gina, who is she's an older woman who has very much been through her years, but she thinks she's very attractive, but she's not. And she's a dancer, is, and she's sort of the rival for Benny, like I said. But she pops up here and there. There's an episode where, that's another cliffhanger at the end of season 4, I think it is that Benny's house catches on fire. Because she threw a lit cigarette, and she put it in the ashtray, but then dumped the ashtray right away, which you should not do, because they're still hot ashes. You don't do that. But, and it caught her curtain on fire. And so her house caught on fire, and then her car caught on fire. So at one point, George has to drive her around, and her friends are around. And so it was Angie, but Angie gets too annoyed by it, so he ended up driving all the kids around. She has Carmen do it, but Carmen doesn't. She's only 16, so it doesn't work out. But George has to do it. And they go through the drive-through, and he gets really pissed off, and Gina's there, and then yeah. And then there's a character introduced early on, too, in season 2 named Hosni, that I thought was going to be around more, but he's just in that episode. There's a couple of background characters that show up here and there, too, just to have little bit roles throughout the series, but they also kind of disappear. Actors just leave and come back and all that. Remember that there was a guy helping Captain Man before Schwoz? Yeah, his name was Gooch. And then Schwoz came along, and it was a couple episodes later, Gooch was gone. That happened. Characters come along and disappear all the time. Yeah. But Benny ends up moving out of the Lopez house because George has enough of her. Ends up moving in with an argument with Angie, moving in with Ernie, who is still living with his parents. But this is where George talks him into moving on his own. So I'll stay for a few days, and then something happens with Max. There's a school shooting, which it's not really done properly because it's like that's not the focus. We find out that Max's trauma is actually because of George and Benny arguing constantly. But then they argue again later anyway, and it just goes, I don't know, it goes away. You know there was actually a crossover. The show crossover with another show. In 2006, the show, 2005, 2006, whatever, the show crossed over with another show produced by the same company called Freddie, starring Freddie Prinze Jr. Much like with George Lopez, it was based on Freddie Prinze Jr.'s upbringing. You know, his dad, Freddie Prinze, looking good, passed away when he was young. So he was raised primarily by women. So the show is about him living with a bunch of women and raising his niece. And so the episode, this crossover, it's a 2-part. It's one episode of George Lopez, one episode of Freddy. And I'm going to do a full review on the whole crossover, so I'm going to kind of go through the plot points here. But in the episode, Max is on the computer typing to the niece, Zoe. And George thinks it's a cyber predator. And on the other side, Freddy also thinks it's a cyber predator. So they make plans to meet, thinking that they're both going to out a cyber predator. And they meet at Ernie's place because that's where you want to do it. And it turns out they're both trying to protect the niece and son and all that. One of the funniest lines, though, is when he shows the picture. He goes, "Hey, that's my daughter Carmen, my son Max, and my wife Benji. Hello." Is that a garden gnome with a cigarette in his mouth? No, man, that's my mom. I like that. There's more. There's a one episode in season 6 where there's a garden gnome in the yard, and I think, man, if my mom grew a beard, it would be just like her, you know. But yeah, I will say that the first part, the George Lopez part, is the stronger of the two, because it is like this, and it just kind of fizzles out in the second part. Because the second part, even though like the whole thing about the kids getting together, it's kind of just thrown away so we could follow George and Freddy and have them kind of fight over who had the worst upbringing. I don't know, but it's a fun crossover. I wish they would have crossed over with more. Well, I don't know what else produced this production company did. So, so who knows? So the final episode, we'll talk about the finale. I think we talked. Oh no! After Carmen leaves, so early on, partway through season 5, we're introduced to Veronica Palmero. That's Vic's granddaughter, Angie's niece, and so by marriage, George's niece, and she gets all the inheritance, but George is named the guy in control of it all. So he's trying to teach her how to do it right, and he's had up to wit's end, but then decides he's going to, help her out. She stays with them for a little while, and then after Carmen leaves, she takes over. She comes in and she lives with them. She does not have much. I think most of her character stuff was done by the time she was regular. They just needed another cast member to fill out the cast, I think, because she doesn't do much. She's sort of there. Stuff's happening, and then she's there. Like, the thing most she does is that she scams Vic and them out of poker. But, yeah. So let's talk about the finale. So, in the sort of 2-part finale, there's a whole thing going on where Max is not disciplined. He's going to be out of school for a week because of a spring break or something. So, because he messed with the computer and broke it, he's going to have to pay off the $1,000. What kind of computer is only $1,000? They just said about it 2 years prior, so maybe it was on sale then. I don't know. But so he's going to work at the factory to pay it off, and Max decides he wants to stay at the factory like his dad did because he likes it there. But George is pushing for him to go to college, and that becomes confirmed. Like, what would happen if the factory shut down? Everybody gets all, the factory's shutting down. What's going on? What's going on? And he's like, no, it's not happening. I was just trying to prepare Max. And then Mel shows up and was like, how'd you know? How'd you know that the factory's going to shut down? They got a new buyer, and we're going to sell the factory to him. He's going to move to Mexico. So we're introduced to Mr. Vega, played by Edward James Olmos, who, he's supposed to be in there giving this Vega guy a piece of his mind. And basically, he offers George a job in Arizona. So the whole rest of the episode is him preparing to go to Arizona. He gets some closure with his mom, saying she's going to miss him. And then he gets some closure with Vic. You're like a son to me. And they hug and gives him like a little pocket knife thing. Used to castrate cows or pigs. We used to castrate pigs with it. My father and I will go out to the field and castrate pigs with it. Get some closure with them. Veronica does nothing. She's not even in the episode, I don't think. And no one even mentions Carmen here. Like, they talk about moving and talk about how it's going to affect Max. Did anyone call Carmen and tell him, hey, Sasuke, we're going to move to Arizona, right? So if you come back here and we're not here, it's because we moved, you know? No one says nothing. Well, that's another one he does. I can't do nothing in this house. Anyway, so he ends up at the people of the factory. Benny is already quits because there's a storyline where there's a new health plan. Everybody who smokes has to quit smoking, which is not a good idea. You don't want to have a bunch of smokers quit at the same time. Because trust me, I've been through, not me personally, but I've seen people who try to quit and how irritable they are. Oh, you don't want, if you have more than one of them at a time, like half the people there maybe. Oh no. So Benny can't do it. In fact, there's a gag where Max says that Veronica is hogging the bathroom with the hair dryer. But Veronica's in there because she says that she doesn't take showers when Max is around. By the way, they have a bit of a running gag where Max is constantly hitting on her. That's your cousin, dude. You don't do that. Like, and then they just sort of brush it off, but that's his cousin. Like, for George, it's through marriage. But the kid is blood related because of Angie. So it just that didn't age well. I'll say that. Just didn't age well. So anyway, the people at the factory organize a sit-in, basically. Ernie's idea was to move all the machines out into the parking lot, and George was like, yeah, make it easy. We're going to put it into the trucks. He's like, no, we'll cover it with butter. And I guess he does cover the machines with butter. We don't see it, but like I don't think we even see Ernie, or maybe we do. Sit in. Even George and Angie and Max sit there, and Benny. Oh yeah, so Benny's not working there anymore, and she gets with an ex-boyfriend of hers, Wayne, played by Jerry Springer, of all people, rest in peace. And so they don't get married, but they get together, and so she has all the money coming from him. She doesn't need a job, and she quits. And so she's there to support George, even though she doesn't say it. Wayne does. And apparently demands were made off screen, and the Vega guy says, okay, you can stay here, but Jack and Mel are coming to Mexico with me, so you're going to be in charge. No one else above him anymore. He is in charge. He's the big guy running the factory. So, yeah, that's sort of his closure. Is now he's the big guy. He's making the big money. He's going to be the runner of the factory, the owner of the factory now, which kind of could change the name to Lopez Aviation, because he's the owner now, right? Just saying. And it sort of just ends there. I don't think you even see him tell Angie. He just has one last talk with his mom, and then it ends. Because it wasn't supposed to be the series finale. They canceled it. Right? And actually, a few years ago, like in 2019 or so, George was trying to get a reboot of this going with Netflix. But Warner Brothers, who owned the IP, this was on ABC, but Warner Brothers has the distribution rights and owns the IP, said no. They were fine with just not doing it. And I'll never get that. Like Warner Brothers is turning out to be very shitty when it comes to stuff. Like they'll greenlight movies only to then say nah and never release them just so they can get the tax break, which that should be fucking illegal. Alright? If you're gonna make a movie, release the fucking thing. That is people's jobs, time, money. You know? The Batgirl movie, the Scoob prequel, and Coyote vs. Acme were all movies that were supposed to come out on HBO Max, and Warner Brothers went, nah, we'll just throw them away, and we'll get the tax money, which that should be illegal. I mean, you know how Uwe Boll got away with doing so much shitty films because of the tax break he got from filming wherever the hell it is. You know, so a lot of shows film in Canada because of the tax break. It's cheaper up there. But like here, what Warner Brothers is doing with those movies is illegal, and so they see this and they didn't tell him no. They went out of their way to stop George from making the reboot. So we're never gonna see reboot because Warner Brothers is a piece of shit now. Because yeah, it's not just that they said no; they went out of their way. They intervened and went, "No, you're not doing this." They went out of their way to stop him from doing it. Is what I read. So that's why we got Lopez versus Lopez instead. And from what I read, there is a bit of a George Lopez reunion on there, but they had to be different names. Kind of like on Homer, kind of like in what's the Last Man Standing. They had like a home improvement thing on there too. So yeah, overall, this was fun going back through the show and watching it. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I left my ass off, and I'm gonna miss watching. I might go back and rewatch it again at some point, but not now. But yeah, and I highly recommend the show. So, what are your thoughts on George Lopez? And when it comes to, we should like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I've been Scotty, and I'm not giving any hints for the next one because I'm probably going through 25 different ideas before I get to it. I want to, like I said, I want to do the Nick at Night one, but I don't know how long it's going to take for me to get what I need to do it. So just keep in mind that's you know, it's on the docket, but I don't know how far into the future. So thank you for watching. I'm Scotty, and I'll see you in the next one.